subscribe! Hey folks, well, 2021 is coming to an end, and it wasn't without its memorable, amazing moments. We have said oftentimes this has been one of the most historic years in professional wrestling history, and one of the big reasons, probably the biggest reasons, is because of All Elite Wrestling bringing, in many ways, professional wrestling back to the pop mainstream culture. They used people from WWE, they used homegrown guys, and they had a very historic year. And this is the top 5 moments of All Elite Wrestling in 2021. Join us, won't you? March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, 2021. Thunder Rosa, Britt Baker, lights out match. To understand the importance of this match, you have to understand where the women's division was at the time. It was the most heavily scrutinized division in AEW, with many people wondering why it was so bad considering the rest of the company was so good. Enter Thunder Rosa and Britt Baker. The two had been building a rivalry, trading wins over the last several months. This match had all the hardcore elements and storytelling you would want in any match, let alone a women's division match. The match was perfect. Great pace, violent spots, and the good guy overcoming the odds, with Thunder Rosa beating the good doctor. But just as Shawn Michaels did against Razor Ramon in WrestleMania 10, and Bret Hart did against the British Bulldog in SummerSlam 92, despite losing, Britt Baker became the bigger star in the match. She showed she wasn't just the pretty chosen one that was all but guaranteed to become the first AEW Women's Champion a year and a half prior. And Thunder Rosa, with the win and her performance, elevated her stock amongst North American wrestling fans as well. And Britt Baker quickly became in the conversation for best female wrestler on the planet. Both wrestlers and the entire company in the women's division was elevated by this match. And also, just like Shawn and Bret did before her, Britt Baker went on to win the major championship in the company at the following Double or Nothing. And now we are wondering when the rematch will be, and it wasn't just us that thought this was an important match. Britt Baker mentioned it's just built such a strong foundation for the women's division. It added legitimacy to the women's division that was so under fire. And Tony Khan simply called it fucking historic. And yours truly actually called it the most important women's wrestling match since the inaugural Hell in the Cell with Charlotte Flair and Sasha Banks several years ago. These two women absolutely brought the pain to themselves and, of course, for us. And that's number 5 here in Top Moments in 2021 for AEW. Number 4, CM Punk MJF Promo, November 24th, 2021. When CM Punk returned after 7.5 years of a hiatus, it was said other than his debut, he really hadn't done anything to write home about. Also, when he arrived, many people would wonder if he would be able to carry himself on the mic against pipe bomb-dropping wrestlers. But one in particular was the one people wanted to see the most. Enter Maxwell Jacob Friedman. MJF had been considered one of the top mic guys in the business. MJF, ballsy, unapologetic, and biting. Would Punk be able to hang with the young man from Long Island? We found out on Thanksgiving Eve in CM Punk's hometown of Chicago, as MJF interrupted Chicago's son before he was to have an opening match on the show. MJF and CM Punk traded barbs, MJF pointing out that Punk is a little scared and has not beaten anybody or said anything of interest. He also said CM Punk looked like a meth head. Punk responded with some pipe bombs of his own about the MJF moniker standing for My Jealous Fan, and he even went so far with the most disrespectful comment I have ever seen in professional wrestling history by referring to MJF as a less famous Miz. The balls to call another professional wrestler The Miz was something that I couldn't even forgive. But these guys on this day went for over 20 minutes of edge on your seat, quality professional wrestling programming, or as JR called it, serious professional wrestling television. It was so good, I looked back and watched it 9 times.
9 times. 9 times.
The scary part is CM Punk said, it's just the beginning. With CM Punk recently foreshadowing costing MJF a chance to go for the AEW Championship on the most recent AEW Dynamite. This is going to get good. This is going to get really good, like on the reels. But either way, it is number 4 on our top 5 moments of AEW in 2021. Number 3, September 22nd, 2021, AEW Dynamite Grand Slam. Kenny Omega and Bryan Danielson go to a 30-minute time limit draw. Bryan Danielson debuted at 2021 AEW. I was there live, and then I watched it back on television several times. This match was perfect. And this was one of the few moments that had these very lofty expectations, but the expectations were not only met, they were smashed. Bryan, who recently main evented WrestleMania, made his debut, and within weeks, he was in the ring with Kenny Omega in a non-title match. The match had the crowd for the entire 30 minutes. In fact, there was a monster standing ovation when the bell rang. Both men knew the moment was at hand, smiling, and Kenny Omega trying to keep kayfabe mouthed, "I don't give a shit," even though he clearly knew this was a monster moment in professional wrestling history. It was a return of professional wrestling to New York City, and that standing ovation was a cathartic moment that gave you goosebumps. If you were there, or even if you were watching it on television. It was an introduction also to the mainstream, just who the hell the American Dragon was, for those of us who just knew him as Daniel Bryan, the B-plus underdog character he had been playing. It was a well-constructed story with emotions, great spot, and leave the audience clamoring for more. But this would just have to be good enough. The moment was just a special moment in wrestling history and a celebration that real pro wrestling had returned to New York City, returned to the mainstream, and the optimism of the entire industry was encapsulated in this 30-minute match. It was a thing of beauty. And you know what? We can't wait to see these guys do it again. Incidentally, not one finisher was completed in this entire match. Not the label lock, not the one-winged angel, just two great professional wrestlers doing what they do best. They professionally wrestled for some rabid fans. The New York City crowd ate it up, and despite some criticisms of people not liking the draw, but for some reason they love the distracted roll-up finish they see multiple times a week, not naming names, the majority of wrestling fans and wrestling critics believe that this was the match of the year and possibly the best match in AEW history. Great job, boys. Just like Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa, can't wait for the rematch. So thank you so much. Number 3, Kenny Omega, Bryan Danielson, 30-minute draw. Number 2, September 5th, 2021, All Out debuts. AEW debuts Ruby Soho, Adam Cole, and Bryan Danielson. The WWE has seen a mass exodus this past year, not only including the 80 release wrestlers, which also included Ruby Soho, but also several contracts ran out on WWE, and that left AEW with a lot of free agent options. The rumors of all three, amongst others, were running rampant throughout the interwebs. The anticipation was heavy, and AEW did not disappoint. Ruby Soho debuted as a Joker in the Women's Casino Battle Royal to the biggest ovation in her life and her career from her hometown fans in Chicago. Ruby later called it the greatest moment in her career, and every time you see her, she has a smile ear to ear. I think she likes where she ended up. The main event of Kenny Omega and Christian Cage ended with Kenny victorious, and as Kenny, with the entire Elite, started cutting a promo, Kenny said whoever could hang with the Elite is not here or already dead. And then it was all about the boom that introduced the biggest star NXT had the previous 4 years, Adam Cole, baby. Cole, who had been written out of the Elite via being poisoned by the Young Bucks, made a return. The audience was not really sure on which way Adam Cole was going to go, but that answer came very quick as Adam Cole very quickly super kicked Jungle Boy, proving that his intentions was not only to be all Elite, but join his friends in the Elite here at All Out, joining Young Bucks and, of course, Kenny Omega. After the surprise, Kenny Omega started saying his goodbye catchphrase, "The Flight of the Valkyries" hit. The song that became famous with Bryan Danielson, a.k.a. Daniel Bryan, for the last decade. And out came the man who had headlined multiple WrestleManias, including the one earlier in the year, the American Dragon, Bryan Danielson. With a remixed version that I'm still bobbing my head to, Bryan Danielson walked right down and challenged the Elite, seemingly targeting Kenny Omega. And so in less than 3 minutes, AEW had revealed that they had signed two of the biggest stars in WWE over the past several years. It signified AEW wasn't going anywhere. They were going to change the world after all, no matter who liked it. These signings led to Kenny Omega and Jon Moxley, the two biggest stars the company had to offer the first couple of years, to take well-needed respites. The both of you, by the way, Jon Moxley, Kenny Omega, we love you and thank you for everything you did. But just like that, AEW had added so much more star power than they already had. And that's why this is number 2 in the top 5 moments in AEW of 2021. All right, folks, well, before we get to the number 1 moment in AEW in 2021, we have a couple of honorable mentions. Yeah, we have Hangman Adam Page beating Kenny Omega in a culmination of the greatest storyline in the history of wrestling. We also have Malachi Black. Not to mention the reformation of what used to be called the Undisputed Era in NXT as Kyle O'Reilly and Bobby Fish both joined Adam Cole in AEW. MJF and Darby Allin threw down. The Lucha Brothers winning the tag team championships against the Young Bucks was definitely the very pinnacle. No pun intended. But the moment has come. The moment you've been waiting for this entire video. The #1 moment in All Elite Wrestling in the year 2021. Folks, it was a moment that we waited 7.5 years for. The return of the man who has been begged for, chanted for years and years. CM Punk returns to professional wrestling August 20th, 2021. It was the worst kept secret in professional wrestling history. AEW signed its monster building with a rumor that CM Punk was going to arrive. Now, getting 15 to 20,000 people in a building in less than 2 weeks wasn't something AEW was accustomed to, but a brainchild of Tony Khan and CM Punk said, we're going to leak it. And if you paid attention to CM Punk being interviewed, it really wasn't a good secret. Every other time CM Punk was rumored, he had always vehemently denied he was ever going to show up. The one time he was asked, this time he said, I don't know, maybe I might have a prior engagement. It was clear that CM Punk was returning to professional wrestling. It was clear that what professional wrestling fans had been begging for years and years and years, what professional wrestling fans have been chanting throughout wrestling venues and wrestling events, was finally happening. There were pay-per-views on WWE that were hijacked with CM Punk chants. And what was just another sign that, once again, AEW was going to change the game of professional wrestling as they brought back the forgotten son, CM Punk. And it was the only time Rampage ever did over 1 million. 1.3 million people tuned in on a Friday night at 10 o'clock to see Cult of Personality hit and see CM Punk address the crowd to announce his return to professional wrestling. That's right, the anti-hero who caused so many waves and many argue started a revolution back in 2011 had finally returned, and this time with a company he was going to be proud to work for. It was the signifying of a brand new beginning in AEW. It signified that AEW now had the star power to compete with any wrestling company on the planet. And more importantly, it signified the return of a man who absolutely loved professional wrestling, and it was beaten out of him working for WWE. And that is where he proudly announced that he will return to the world of professional wrestling and All Elite Wrestling. And guys, that was your top 5 moments of 2021 for All Elite Wrestling. It was their 3rd year, their biggest year, but I have a feeling 2022 is going to be even bigger. And hopefully it's bigger for all the great wrestling companies in the world. This is what we love to do. This is what we love to talk about. This is what we love to experience. So please like the subscribe button if you like this video. Please follow us on Spotify. Like us on Facebook. You can check me out at HSCP Wrestling or at SSB Show. This is Silicon Steve Alley for Lottie Dottie. This is the top 5 moments in 2021 for All Elite Wrestling. Thank you so much, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Drop the Macho Man Randy Savage elbow right on the subscribe button. Thank you so much, guys. We love you. Have a great year.